in chat. We will also pause along the way for you to offer any insights or comments. So we would like to get started. In what we do at Plummer is we often begin our training sessions with a tuning in exercise. It's truly a way to get us grounded in thinking about the importance of family and kin and significant adults in our own lives. So I'd like to welcome you all just to take a moment and think about which extended family member or supportive adult has had the biggest impact on you and why. So just feel free, just take a moment and reflect on which extended family member or supportive adult has had the biggest impact on you and why. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could jot that, your response in chat, that would be great. Kate will review a few and we can just really set the foundation for a very insightful session. Okay, and if you don't mind, when you start seeing a few chat responses, if you could just read them out loud.
Absolutely. And while we're waiting for experiences, I'll just tell a quick story about my own experiences. Growing up in a divorced household, things were a little bit chaotic sometimes, right? My grandma was always there. We spent every weekend with her, and she had 18 great grandchildren and many more great grandchildren eventually. But she would bring me in to help her do the, prep for dinner into her little pantry. She and I would sit at a little table, and she would always whisper to me when we were in there together, "I just want you to know that you're my favorite." And that meant a lot, as a little kid growing up with some different things going on. And it wasn't until she died and we were at her funeral that we all realized she did that to each and every one of us. Um, and we're seeing some great responses in the chat now. Jessica responded, "My pop, and he helped me learn about my Italian roots and is part of the reason that I am a social worker." Catherine shared, "It was a great aunt. She was the friend that I needed within my family. She played the cool aunt role, but also instilled morals in me." Really, really important influences that we have. Marina shared, "My godmother, who was also my maternal aunt. I lived with her during some challenging family times when I was a kid, and she encouraged my exploring computers and being entrepreneurial, both skills that really paid off for the rest of my life." Um, Great responses in here. I spent a lot of time with my best friend's family. I felt safe and loved there. And then Sabrina shared, "My great grandma always highlighted the importance of sticking up for myself." These are beautiful responses.
Beautiful. So powerful. Thank you all for sharing. Just says so much about the importance of those family connections, those kin relationships that really just help us in so many ways. And I think we know through our own experiences that family connection and relationships, with kin and other adults truly do shape our lives. And they help us really figure out who we are. They mold our beliefs and our values. They may even help us with our career paths. And oftentimes, we know through our work in child welfare that for youth who come into care, just that entry into child welfare, that they often lose these relationships, even relationships that never cause them any harm. And they may not know when they're going to be able to visit with family. They might not know when they will see them or talk with them. And we also know that oftentimes the communication or visits may be dependent on what that young person's behavior may be. Or it may be that someone needs to have the time to make the necessary arrangements so that the visit can occur. So we know, and we have heard it many times, that youth in care are often described as the loneliest individuals. I'd like to share with you this advisory alert from the U.S. Surgeon General. And I think that we all experienced this and really became in tune to it during the epidemic. But we know, and the Surgeon General has now broadcasted it as a national epidemic, that loneliness has become an epidemic and represents an urgent public health concern. In their study, which is called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation, the Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community, right, came up. They had data across 148 studies with an average follow-up time of 7.5 years. And these studies suggested that social connection increases the odds of our survival by 50%. These studies established that social connection is vital, not only to our individual physical, mental, and emotional health, but also to the health and well-being of our communities as a whole. They also found that loneliness and social isolation can increase the risk of premature death by 26% and 29%. And lacking social connection can increase risk for premature death as much as if you were to smoke 15 cigarettes a day. So it matters. It's an epidemic. And I think that oftentimes in our work, we see children and youth who are very lonely because they have lost these relationships. And that is the role that we have found at Plummer, that family search and engagement can play as a best practice to do a piece of reconnection work that is vital to the overall well-being of the children and youth that we work with. Anybody have any thoughts or comments about the Surgeon General's report? We did include the website for you. You can feel free to look it up. I do want to give you a note of caution that it is just about 150 pages in length. So we know that belonging matters. A sense of belonging provides the security and self-assurance needed to achieve potential in our life. We know through our own family relationships that being accepted, feeling safe, secure, having that sense of community, purpose, and unity that kin and provides is essential to the young folks that we work with.
So we're going to start off talking about youth engagement here. It's a big buzzword in our field. And a lot of times I hear the terms authentic youth engagement, right? And really, what does that mean? And so we're going to go into some of the strategies that we can use to really not only elicit a young person's voice in their planning, but also think about some strategies and some ways that we can actually share some of that decision making with them and allow them to have more influence over their lives. And so the definition that we use is really that strengths-based approach, right? To a partnership that allows youth and families to have that direct influence on their lives, to have real power sharing, that we're all sitting around the table together and helping them to come up with a plan that is going to provide them with safety and security. One of the ways that we do that is by always beginning with the young person and the family's perspective, right? And then moving on to the professionals. And then when we're in meetings and when we're doing that planning, really starting with the positives. What is working well? What are those young person's strengths? And then what are those family strengths? And we wanted to share a quick quote that really is pretty powerful. We need connection to survive. Physically, first and foremost, our attachment system is what keeps us alive. Oftentimes in my work, I am talking with young people about the importance of connections, and many of them have been disconnected from people for so long. They say, nope, I don't need people. I've had enough of that. Thank you very much. Sometimes I point out examples to them where we see animals in community, right? How often do you see a wolf alone? How often, sometimes the Canadian geese will be flying overhead, and we can see that they also need each other. And that's just a natural way to be. And I think that this quote really helps to sort of illustrate the importance of that. And so, as we're using this strength based approach to partnership, we have some tools and some guidelines for engagement that can be really helpful. And so we start off really with that trust based relationship. And this can be tough, both for those of us who are working within state agencies that have decision making power over where young people are going to live and what access they'll have to their family, and for those of us that partner in our work with state agencies. But it's really built on honesty, right? And figuring out what are those mutual areas of concerns, what are some shared expectations, and what does accountability look like, not only for young people and their families, but also for us as professionals. And we know that by prioritizing the parent child relationship and that providing those opportunities for meaningful contact will make reunification more timely and to be successful, so that when parent child visits are engaged and family are involved in a young person's life, they are going to have better outcomes. And we also know that families and children are more likely to be willing to partner with us when we develop a trust based relationship with them. And some of the things that we can be thinking about as we are doing this work and trying to build this trust is that self determination, so that those impacted most by the decisions that we're making are central actors in their own case planning and in the decision making. Working with them to identify mutual goals. I love the saying that I've heard more than once in this field of those that help to make the plan, don't battle the plan. And that holds true for both the families we work with as well as the young people that we are partnering with. And what that can look like, right, is asking a parent, what are your concerns? What areas do you see that you'd like to work on? Using the ideas that they come up with to create plans and providing choices and share, again, that decision making power. What do you need to resolve this issue? What will you do? What support do you need from us? And then really recognizing in our language and in our approach to young people and families that parents have both a right and responsibility to their own children, and empowering them to identify the timeframes, the options that are available, and then the consequences they make, being really honest, being able to have conversations in a respectful way, and partnering with them to figure out how do we get to that place of change. And then really focusing on those strengths and needs, right? We want to be really speaking loudly about the strengths that families have that we see. When we see positive steps, we want to be recognizing those often. We want to recognize them in front of other professionals. And we want to be talking about them and then being really honest about what are the needs of this family. We know that informal support networks are really important in sustaining safety. All of us that are professionals that work with a family have an expiration date on our foreheads. At some point, we will no longer be there. And one of the best ways to ensure sustainable safety is by having those natural connections, those grandmas, those aunties, those uncles that are kind of there watching out for young people and providing them with guidance and acting as a safety net for them. And then we also want to talk a little bit about the skillful use of authority. Although we might not feel like it sometimes as caseworkers, case managers, clinicians working with families, we really do have a lot of authority from their perspective. Even if we are not the state agency, we still have a lot of influence, and families view us as having the power to make decisions regarding the removal and the custody of their children. And so it's really, really important to recognize that that is going to be some level of coercion that we have with the families that we're working with. And we need to use that very carefully. And one of the ways that we can do that is really by being skillful and being straight with families. And it doesn't mean that we have to be confrontational or forceful as we talk to children about their safety and well being of their children. It's possible to be very straightforward without being confrontational. And that really means exercising your leverage as an agent of change, speaking to families respectfully, and listening to their ideas and their thoughts and their viewpoints about what their family needs. We want to make sure that we're always honest, even if the things that we have to say are tough. We want to be out upfront with them. And another key is really to concentrate on the child's needs and not the parent's fault. So by staying child focused, it really helps those conversations to be more palatable. It helps us not to sugarcoat the messages that we need to deliver or downplay the seriousness of the situation. And allows us to give accurate information, which can empower the family. And so we want to be eliciting the parents' ideas and identifying what needs to change and getting their ideas about how it might change or how it will look different. And then using those ideas to create our plans, right, with the family and making sure that those plans are going to meet their needs and providing choices whenever we can, providing shared decision-making power. And again, this really recognizes that parents do need to make changes and they should also still have some influence over the plan for their own family and their own children's. And then we want to be thinking about that sense of urgency, right? Sometimes young people that I work with are in care for a decade already. And a lot of times a sense of urgency for them to be able to go home or to figure out where home is going to be has been lost over the years. And really recognizing that childhood is finite and it's very valuable, and helping families to explore how can we get children safely and permanently to where they need to be in a timely way. And then really collaborating deeply with families, because better outcomes are achieved when we work in partnership, both with families and young people, and also the other systems and providers that are involved in a young person's life.
I think this might be a good spot just for us to pause and check in with folks to see if they have any thoughts or comments before we continue.
Absolutely.
So if there's anything you'd like to put in chat, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Thank you, Marina. Marina shared, this is so great. I'm glad that you are finding it valuable.
I guess we will continue then. So we're going to move and talk about youth engagement and go a bit deeper. So we all know from our work, and I'm sure all of you have experience with engaging kids in their planning, but we know that initially, oftentimes youth have difficulty coming up with names, right? We know that they are usually emotionally connected to someone, but there is many reasons why they might not be thinking or identifying that person. So what do we think some of the reasons are that kids are often a bit hesitant to identify family, kin, or other adults who have been significant in their life? Anybody willing to put some thoughts in chat? Why might they be hesitant? What's behind that no? We hear a lot about the no when we're talking about youth engagement. What's behind that no?
Marina shared, afraid that the kin will reject requests for help.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And oftentimes, right, along with that rejecting the help they may need, there's also this fear of being disappointed again, right? And as Kate was saying, particularly when youth have extended stays in care, and we know we've all worked with youth who have had 10 plus years in care, that they are so hopeless, that they really begin to feel like I'm really not going to depend on anyone. I'm going to figure this out on my own. It's always been only me, so that's what I'm going to do. And in a sense, at times, independent living almost becomes glamorized. So we have to really think and help kids work through that and explore the many ways that adults may be able to help them. So we know initially kids may have trouble coming up with names, but as Kate talked about those engagement essentials, once they have that trust-based relationship and have this felt sense of safety with you, they are able to think about adults who have been in their life who may be able to play a role in supporting and helping them. I often, when I'm having a conversation with a young person, I may ask them a question such as, so let me ask you at night, when you are resting your head on your pillow, who are you thinking about? Because we know that even when kids are not with their family or their kin and others who they truly care about, they are thinking about them.
Cheryl,
So,
we are getting some great responses in the chat.
oh, great, let's hear them.
Melissa shared family dynamics can get complicated. Maybe their parents don't like the relative,
Mhm.
even if they are a suitable family member to be connected with. Erica shared loyalty often is a barrier. And then Shelley shared it takes vulnerability to ask for help from others or to expect others to help.
Also very true, right? And we have to really help kids be able to navigate and move through to see, right, that there can be safety within those relationships, right? So very true. And I really appreciate the comment around the loyalty issues because I think that we hear that often from young people, right? So once you get to know the person, you'll have a sense of what questions might work. And it may be that you even have to give them permission to ask or talk about their birth family, previous caregivers. I think that when kids have been in care for extended stays, they often almost become conditioned that no, I'm not supposed to ask about my family. So we have found that by giving permission, kids can open up and really start to ask the many questions they have about their family, but also about their life circumstances. So you think about questions, maybe more solution focused. So who did you go to in the past when things were tough at home? Who was there that really made you feel safe? What was the most memorable place that you lived? What was your favorite spot? Yes, is someone having a comment?
They do, and it's a wonderful one. Marina
Oh,
shared, we have heard some stories of youth who did not want some of their supportive adults to know that they were in care or needed help at all. And they were worried that it would end the relationship they had altogether.
so right. So many worries, right, for young people that we really have to support and help them get beyond. The other question that we often ask is about siblings. We are seeing, right, in child welfare right now that often older siblings can be amazing resources for their younger siblings. So we really need to be asking about siblings and ensuring that kids are seeing in their siblings. Those sibling relationships are the longest relationships of our lives. We know that from our own experiences. And for kids that come into care, they're often the first relationships that they lose or that are changed because of being placed into care. So we just really want to ask questions related to the past, related to if you had a wish to be living with someone, who would it be? Who would you call with good news, with bad news? So different ways. And we have found that, with the youth that we work with, that we often pace the work, right? And we pause and we give kids time to think about who they might want to identify. The other piece at Plummer, we use a lot of practice tools, and we are going to share two tools with you today. We have found that in using practice tools, which are often just documents that really help frame a conversation with a young person. And when you're using the tool, it almost takes their mind off of how challenging this conversation may be, because the focus is also on, filling in this tool or getting them engaged in identifying who may be able to help them. So today we are going to share two. One is the I want to say something tool. And the second one is also about tell me about the day I was born. Hold on here. Let's see. So when we are initiating these conversations, we do have to work to get behind that no. And how I often begin the conversation is I always begin by explaining what my role is. In that my work is going to be to work with that young person to help them figure out what family will be and planning for their future. I don't use the word permanency, but I talk a lot about thinking about family and what it may look like and planning for their future. And I give examples of times that they may need someone to count on, or having that whole sense about belonging, right? That we all need to have that sense of belonging. And after I have familiarized myself with information about that young person, I'm able to even suggest potential adult connections that maybe they had forgot about or maybe fearful about sharing. And I think it's really important to think about following the youth's lead. So we know that this is not going to be a one-time conversation, that we are going to continuously, every time we are face to face with that young person, we are having a conversation about family and planning for their future. So even though during one visit it may just be 5 minutes, the next it may be 20, but that young person begins to realize, oh, every time she comes, we're talking about this, and they will, over time, engage with you about it. So it's really about being genuine and engaging the youth in the process. We're not doing it to or for them, we are doing it with them. And when that no comes out, we are not arguing about the no, but we are talking rather about the universal need for having that one person to count on. And we know, particularly with our older youth, they are so often consumed with survival in the here and now that they have a hard time focusing on the future. So it can help to help that young person develop that future orientation, giving them goals, or perhaps adult connections that you're aware that may be helpful. Maybe getting assistance with a driver's license, applying to college, finding work, thinking about a career. And we're always going at the youth's pace, but we're continually visiting that conversation to challenge the status quo of that youth not having anyone. So just wondering if there isn't any ideas that you have all found helpful in your work. Or anything in chat, Kate?
Not yet. I will share that I agree with the comments regarding loyalty conflicts. And I think one of the responsibilities that we have as the person working on permanency with a young person is to take the responsibility for having those conversations and connecting adults to each other and making sure a young person knows that we're going to take the responsibility for those hard conversations and that they won't be left to manage any sort of fallout from requesting help from a particular family member or connection. We're going to manage that and we're going to sort of face it head on and have conversations with mom or with dad and with that family member and help them to become child-centered so that the young person is able to focus on the connection that they need and to sort of over time hopefully have permission from all of the adults that they care about to be connected to the people that they need.
That's true. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Kate. It is really so important. So what we'd like to do now is we are gonna, in a minute, share a clip with you. And in the clip, you are gonna see that I am using a tool with a young person. So we thought that even though we were going to share a couple tools, it might also be interesting for you to see a demonstrated conversation about what it may look like as you present the whole concept of a tool to a young person. So I'm just going to take a moment and read Justice's background with you. So Justice, she, her, hers, is a 13-year-old youth who was adopted as an infant. The adoptive parents relinquished their rights, and the adoption was dissolved when Justice was 12 years old. She has been in child welfare custody since that time, and she lived in both foster and group care settings. Justice has many strengths. She is caring, she does well academically, enjoys sports, especially soccer. Her caseworker describes Justice as being one of the sweetest kids I've ever known. Given her history of trauma, loss, and family disruptions, Justice is understandably ambivalent about joining a new family. She has shared that she would want a family that enjoys sports, is active, and has other children so that she will have siblings. So, what you're going to see in this clip that we're going to share is an initial conversation with Justice to really engage her to be a participant in our planning and also even the development of what information we're going to be sharing about her. So I am going to play this clip, but I do want you to all be aware that the sound quality is not really great. So we have added captions so that even though it may be challenging to hear, you'll be able to read along with the conversation. So here we go. Hi, Justice. How are you?
I'm okay.
Okay. Well, I came out today to introduce myself to you and also to talk with you about my role in the work that you and I are going to do together to really do some planning about who family will be for you.
Yeah, I don't really know about the whole family thing because, well, I tried to find a family before and you know how that worked out, so.
I know, and I am really sorry that that happened to you. And I know that it also makes it really hard for you to think about and even talk about family. But I just want to assure you that that's my job, right? And that all kids need to be in a family. So that's the work that you and I are going to do together. Well, you're going to be 14 years old, so it's really important that you have a voice in this planning about family for you.
All right, I guess, yeah.
So I want you to know that I'm always going to be here to answer questions you may have about this. I hear from kids all the time how hard this is, but we're going to pace it, and I'm going to listen to you, and we're going to do this work together.
So, you work with other kids like me?
Sure. All the time. That's my job, really, to help kids get to family. And, right now, I'm working with a 16-year-old boy who also wants a family. So I do this all the time. And I want you to know, it's part of my job to get to know you so then I can share information about you with the families that are going to be interested, right?
Okay.
So I have to know things about what you like, even what you dislike. I want to know the things you're really good at, maybe some things about school, but I also want to know about, the things that you wish for. And maybe, like all kids, what you're worried about. Really important, though, that I tell you I am not going to share any information unless you give me permission. So that's why you're going to be really involved.
Okay. Am I gonna get to see what you say about me or what you write down about me? Or?
Absolutely. You're going to be involved every step of the way. Whatever I am writing about you, you're going to take a look at and review. And we'll talk about it together if there are things you want to change.
Okay.
So for today, right, why don't we just start to get to know each other? So I was wondering, can you just tell me one thing you're really good at?
I don't really know what to say.
I think you're being a little shy and modest because I've heard that you are a great soccer player.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty good at soccer. I'm fast and I do score a lot of goals. So.
You know, sometimes when I'm having these conversations with kids, I find it helpful to use this tool, and it's called 10 Things I Want You to Know About Me. And it's just a way for you to share some of the things you like, maybe some of your dislikes. So what do you think? Could we try to do that activity together so I can get to know more about you?
I don't know. I mean, it sounds a little bit like for little kids, and plus I actually have a meeting with program now, so I don't even know if I have time actually.
Well, let me put you at ease that the program knows that it's really important that you're meeting with me today. So it's fine. You don't have to worry about missing anything. They know that you and I are talking. And I'm kind of smiling about the tool because so many kids tell me that same thing. Oh, I'm too old to do that. But then once we start to do it, they find it really helpful. So I'm wondering if we could just kind of give it a try.
All right, maybe a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you something first. So you said you love soccer, but now what about school? Do you have a favorite subject in school?
Well, yeah, I like math. I'm pretty good at math actually.
Great. All right. Yeah, that means you must have a favorite teacher.
Oh yeah, Mr. G. He's really cool.
That's great. So, see, that's important for families to know, right? That math is really a strong subject for you, but you're pretty smart. So here, why don't you take a look at the tool, and why don't you pick the next thing about yourself? It's either a fun fact or one of the questions.
Well, there's one about food and my favorite foods. And I do love pizza and chips and ice cream. Those are my favorite foods.
Okay, good. It's important for families to know, right? What you're going to like to eat.
Yeah, especially because here the food stinks, so.
Oh, kids talk about the horrible food at their program all the time. You're not alone. All right, so let me ask you this, because it's going to be important for us to also share with families what your wishes are about family. Do you have a wish when you think about family?
Well, I guess, I definitely want to be in a family where I can keep playing soccer. So it would be good to be with other kids who like sports, and I definitely don't want to be the only kid, so.
Right, so one of your worries is about being the only child in a family.
Yeah, I don't like that, to be the only kid, because, I don't know, it just makes me feel like all the attention's on me, like too much pressure.
Well, that is really important for me to know, right? And I'm going to certainly pay attention to that's one of your worries. You do not want to be an only child. And I think we need to look for a family that has a pretty active lifestyle, right? Who can go to those soccer games with you.
Yeah.
Well, you shared quite a bit today, and I know that this can be awkward and really hard to do. So thank you. I've enjoyed our time together, and I want you to know you smiled quite a bit. So I think we're going to take our time and do this work together. I'll see you soon.
All right, so we can see that was an initial conversation with Justice, and in using the tool, it certainly did help to frame the conversation that Justice was able to really talk about the food she likes. So we're starting like very strength-based in our conversation, but notice that we did also get to what her worries would be, and it is so true that oftentimes when we ask about a young person's worries, it really can provide what our next steps, what our work will look like with them, because we really do want to address the worries that you have. Now, Kate is going to share a little bit more detail about this tool called the 10 Things.
Absolutely. So we wanted to share tools that we use at Plummer a lot to help sort of structure these conversations that one can feel kind of strange to young people who have been in care, because sometimes people are not having these conversations with them regularly, and they may have learned that these kinds of conversations make other people uncomfortable. And so really giving some structure to these conversations, normalizing these conversations because they're so common that there is a form for them, and then really eliciting their voice in their own planning. And it's important to think about that when we use these tools, it's important to use them strategically. And it's critical to use them as part of a process of helping that young person to share their voice and not as a task to be completed and checked off. And so when we use these tools, we want to be thinking about how are we going to use this tool once it's completed? How is the process going to help that young person to think about what they need? Um, who might we want to share that completed tool with that young person's consent? And maybe using the tool to engage parents, to engage extended family members, and other important connections for that young person. And often this can be really instructive in how we can involve people in teaming and doing that planning together in figuring out where a young person is going to do their growing up.
Kate, I just wanted to add on this 10 things tool, how when we developed it, we added the quote at the top, which you can read. It's from Hannah. And what Hannah is saying is, I want a family of my own, a family who will love me, help me do well in school, and really prepare me for the future. And I want to be part of something. I have a lot of love to give. So really powerful. And I think that it helps kids seeing like, wow, look at this is what Hannah said, but you can even customize it and remove that tool and maybe that quote and put a quote of the young person you're working with. So just a thought.
Absolutely, a beautiful way to use this tool. And I think this also helps, again, sometimes there's a real lack of urgency in a young person's planning. And even we as workers may think, you know what, they're stable, they're doing well in their placement, they're doing pretty well in school, maybe they're okay. And really bringing their voice in with with this 10 things tool can help people to understand that they have the same needs and hopes for family that all young people have. And so this is really helpful too, in depending on what a young person shares. This can help an engaging extended family who may not have been involved for a while in helping them to envision sort of what are the parts of this young person's life that I may be able to play a role in, even if I'm feeling a little bit of that natural ambivalence about really stepping in and taking placement. It gives you a starting point to bring young people and their connections together. And so we're going to share a second tool with you today, which is called the I Want to Say Something tool. This is actually one of my favorite tools to use. We do a lot of teaming at Plummer, and we do a lot of work to really put that philosophy of sharing decision-making power and having very honest conversations into practice by having young people and families co-create their meeting agendas and really using tools with the young person's voice to create their goals. And this tool is it's really flexible, can be used in a lot of situations. And there is a version for young people, but there is also a version for parents, caregivers, grandparents, extended family members. And it really gives them a concrete way to share, again, what's going well, what they're worried about, the things that they hope are going to happen. And it allows them also to identify the people that they need on their team. And we use the word team a lot. Um, who needs to be there to help them to be safe and stable and feel secure in their growing up? For young people, that can let us know who are they feeling connected to, who might they be missing. And for adults, it can let us know who's that person's support group, right? Where does that support network that parent or caregiver may need moving forward in order to be successful. And so it's a conversation starter. Again, we want to focus on the process of this and then using this strategically to advance the permanency plan and develop the permanency plan for a young person. And we can start off with that conversation by asking some questions like, when you think about your family, what do you like the most? What's something that's really hard about being in your family? Or When you think about your family, what worries do you have? When you need help, who helps you? Or who would you want to call with good news or bad news? As Cheryl said, who would you like to invite to your graduation party? For older youth who may feel that they don't need a family to finish their growing up in, it may even be someday when you're a mom or dad, who do you hope is there with you at the hospital, helping you to get ready for raising your own child? Or if you have an emergency, if you get a flat tire or you're short on rent, who is it that you would call to help you? And then those are the people that we integrate into this tool as part of the young person's team. And then we use that to take it a step further and actually involve them in planning, in meetings, in figuring out how do we move forward for this young person? How do we get them closer to being a part of a family? So we have a few tips for using these tools. And really, again, we want to use these in a non-threatening way. I find that a lot of young people are not able to think about these things and write at the same time. So some kids want to grab the form and fill it out themselves and then talk about it. But a lot of young people will only engage if I scribe. And so they're telling me, and I'm very careful to write down the exact words that they use because this does need to be their voice. So I don't want to be inserting things into it. And I'm not above saying, hey, you know what? Let's go to Panera and get some mac and cheese and sit down and fill this out. So whatever you can do to make this a process that's going to be easier for a young person to get to engage in. I have this one memorized now. So sometimes when we're driving in the car and I have a captive audience next to me and there's not a need for direct eye contact, I might ask them these questions while we're driving somewhere. And then we want to be thinking, and we want to be helping that young person to be thinking about how are we going to bring their voice into planning? How do we use these tools? And so with their consent, you know, if a young person's expressed, I miss my grandma, I haven't seen her very often. I think she's mad at me because, you know, mom wasn't doing good and I got taken into care. We want to be asking for their consent to have those conversations with those adults. And we might need to use that tool and bring that into that conversation because it can be a lot more powerful to hear things from the child directly. And so we want to use them to identify who can be a significant, you know, part of their support network. And then again, always focus on the process and not the completed project because we really want to be listening deeply and engaging in that conversation with that young person as we're doing this. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Kate. We really do find that the using of the tools is just very beneficial and it can be so powerful what youth really do share on the tools in terms of their wishes, their worries, and their hopes about family. All right, so just want to take a moment and share with you all that we often highlight that this is truly all about safety within relationships, not from relationships. And in doing our work as youth are identifying adults that may be able to play a role, that we're thinking about it, what would need to be in place for this person to, depending on their role, be involved. What would need to be in place for this adult to simply provide and share information? Maybe to be part of that planning team that Kate talked about. What would we need to be in place to ensure safety? At Plummer, when we're thinking about safety, we're not only thinking about physical safety, which of course we are always prioritizing, but we're thinking about psychological safety. Who are the attachment figures that that child or youth has that we need to bring back into their life? What will it take for this person to have safe contact with the youth? And then, of course, the parameter around an adult being considered for placement is going to be very different than the parameter for providing and sharing information. So it's just a reminder that we need to set the parameter because there can be a role for many adults that have been missing in the lives of the youth that we work with. So as we're getting close to the end of our session today, we always do like to ensure that we have youth voice in our sessions. So we want to share this short clip with you. And in this clip, you are going to meet Jonathan and JJ, two youth that we have worked with at Plummer, and they're going to really share their thoughts about the importance of their voice in planning. So let me just play this quick clip for you.
The other question that we had talked about was, what can you tell us about the importance of youth voice in your permanency work? And how has that changed? Because you both have had, you know, a considerable stay in care. So when you think about how your voice in your planning has changed from when you initially came into care until the most recent time in care when the focus was more about family and family relationships, how has that changed?
So growing up in the foster care system with DCF, I don't know how they do it in other states, but here in Mass, you have foster care reviews and you also have court hearings. Now, at a young age, I wanted to attend those meetings, but I was prohibited. I was not allowed because I was too young, which I think is totally inappropriate. I have a big thing that if my name is being said, I want to hear about it. It's my life, not yours. So growing up, I found myself very frustrated that I couldn't attend these hearings. I couldn't have my voice heard. And when people are making decisions about my life and they don't ask my opinion or my voice, it hurts. And a lot of times it can screw over the child. You know, my first time with my voice being heard was when I moved into Plummer. I remember the first day I moved into Plummer, big group home, and one of the social workers is talking. The Plummer social worker is talking to my DCF worker, and then she goes to me and she's like, "So, what do you want? Like, what's your say in all this?" And I was kind of blown away. I was like, "You guys actually care about my opinion on what I have to say?" Because that was never a thing. And they asked me what I wanted, and I asked for certain things, and if they couldn't follow through, they gave me reasons why. They reported back to me. But when it came to like, oh, I want to look into this family, oh, I want to do this, they worked with me. Or if they couldn't, they sat down and broke down the reasons why they couldn't. And DCF didn't do that. DCF wouldn't even ask. So I think a lot has changed since I entered the foster care system in the early 2000s to now, in 2020. I think we're more progressive and more open to different outside the box ideas.
Thank you, Jonathan. And JJ, let me repeat the question for you. So what can you tell us about the importance of your voice in your permanency work?
I agree with Jonathan. A lot of times you can't go to your foster care review till you're like, I think 14. But I think like at the age of 11 and 12, I fully knew what was going on. And like I had a voice and I had opinions that should have been heard. Fortunately for me, though, I had a very good judge. So he would pull me aside to the back and like ask me how I was feeling or if there was anything that DCF was doing. And he had good communication with me. So that was something that I always had. But in regards to like my day-to-day workers or my program staff, it was never, what does JJ want? What does JJ need? It was always, you need to do this, that, and the third. So for me to come to Plummer and then be like, oh, what are your goals? What do you want in life? That was a new thing for me. I was like, you guys care about that? You guys care about what I want? And like, when someone actually sits there and talks to you and cares about your opinions and validates your emotions, it was something completely different. So I can say that my voice being heard has progressed. It's not where I want it to be because I'm still very, not communicate. I don't know how to communicate some things, but I can definitely advocate for myself now.
So powerful and so important, right? To prioritize
The other question
their voice. Every interaction with youth matters. Make yours count. All right, Kate, I'm going to stop sharing so we can open it up to any questions folks may have.
Stephanie said, thanks to JJ for sharing. And I'd like to second that because JJ just says it like it is. And she is so perceptive about what her needs were and what really mattered.
And through their voice, both have found families. JJ was adopted at 22, although she doesn't live 24/7 with the adoptive family. She has family who not only accept and care for her, but also care and invite and welcome her birth family. And Jonathan became very connected with in his Plummer foster home. I was attending church with his foster mom and met a family, and now has recently moved to Florida with that family. So they both have found family. Yeah, that's great. Any thoughts or questions before we end the session? We want to thank you all for Zooming in. I know there were several handouts, the PowerPoint, and other information from Melissa put in to chat. So feel free to use all those resources. And if you do have any questions, you can always reach us at Plummer Youth Promise.
Absolutely.
Enjoy the
Thank
rest of
you.
the day.
Thank you so much, Kate and Cheryl. Really appreciate your time and expertise. And we will be meeting again on November 7th at the same time. And the topic for that session is going to be prioritizing permanency and supervision. So please join us and check on all the links we posted for all the resources that were shared today and our other learning community sessions that have been recorded. Thank you all for joining us. And thanks again, Cheryl and Kate. We really appreciate it and your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.